I've got the black job tonight, and I'm glad to have it. And I'm not sure that we have ever, that is, as black folks, had the benefit of an honest relationship with media, for-profit media, in the United States. I wasn't able to watch the film before you did tonight, so I did some prepared remarks that I hope will be complimentary to the film, and I'll address specifics of the film later on. I think that for black Americans, any discussion of the corporate media, and we used to call it just the white media, must take into consideration the special treatment that black people have been accorded by the US media historically. Either black people were treated as invisible, as if we really weren't here, which was of course the biggest lie of all, or the newspapers would whip up anti-black hatred with headlines like "Black Buck Runs Amok." And that really was an actual headline. This is not apocryphal, and there were many variations on that theme. Most people today would say that headlines like "Black Buck Runs Amok" are just incitements to racial hatred, but they served a purpose. They served the interests of the white businessmen who owned or were served by those newspapers. That's because the whole structure of political control, and I'm talking largely about in the South, the whole structure of political control was based on one party, one white man's party, one white man's Democratic Party. And that form of control was buttressed by the periodic application of mob rule, what we used to call lynch law. So you had to keep the specter of that black buck running amok in order to keep the rule of white businessmen intact under a one-party system. And that's the only way it could run smoothly, was to have this specter of black bucks running amok. So it served a real businessman's purpose in terms of the system of political control that they had created. You can't make a separation between these "Black Buck Runs Amok" headline producing newspapers and the larger system of control. So there was a real method to the meanness of these newspapers. They weren't just frothing at the mouth and letting off racist steam, and that's why it was so consistent throughout the South. The "Black Buck Runs Amok" variety of journalism was as central to the white South's crimes against black humanity as the Nazi newspapers were to Adolf Hitler's one-party Aryan state in Germany. And that fact was recognized by the War Crimes Tribunal that met in Nuremberg after World War II. The judges found that a person named Julius Streicher, he was the publisher of a newspaper called Der Sturm, I think that means the storm, that his activities were inseparable. They were inseparable and commingled with Hitler's crimes in Germany while he was publishing. So they hung him. It was logical to hang him as being part and parcel of that Nazi regime. They hung him right alongside the other German politicians and a couple of generals. So the question then must be who and how many whos are going to be hanged to atone for the 6 million Congolese who have died since 1998. We have to ask the question, should any American media people answer for that crime just like Julius Streicher did in Germany? We know, and it's irrefutable, that Bill Clinton and George Bush and Barack Obama and Susan Rice are guilty of crimes in the Congo. They paid for the genocide and they paid for the weapons that carried out that genocide. And it was their underlings in Rwanda and Uganda who were the perpetrators of by far the greatest genocide since World War II. We're not talking about a sideshow, although it was made to look like a sideshow, but the greatest slaughter since World War II. And even the United Nations said so. That is, the killers were known. The United States tried to suppress the evidence, and it tried to do that right there at the UN. But the evidence was known to too many people, and it was known to too many countries. It was known throughout the UN, so it couldn't be suppressed. It couldn't be kept a secret, except from those Americans who get their news from the corporate media. Virtually all of the corporate media ignored the greatest slaughter of human beings in 70 years. When the corporate media do take notice, because that bloodletting is ongoing, it's still going on. When the corporate media do take notice of what's going on in the Eastern Congo, they usually dismiss the facts as just, well, those are just Africans killing other Africans, as if that is the natural African thing to do. They don't tell you what most of the world already knows, that these Africans were armed and they've been financed by the Americans to commit genocide in service of American foreign policy goals. This relates, I think, directly to the film in its segment on crack cocaine. And the crack cocaine hysteria is really a kind of version of Black Buck Runs Amok. It's designed to defame and target a whole people. And Michelle Alexander speaks at length about that in her book, The New Jim Crow. The corporate media, and by that, this time I'm talking about the much larger universe of corporate communications outfits, these large conglomerates that were talked about in the film, the Big Five. This corporate media has been central to the oppression of black folks in general, and especially to the creation of a regime of black mass incarceration. One of the most effective ways that it does that is by the glorification of the cops. US media celebrate the police use of deadly force in innumerable television shows over and over again every week, and of course with more special effects and drama in the movies. They celebrate the militarization of the police, and you can't separate that from the social granting of impunity to the police and from the rise of mass incarceration. In other words, the corporate media foster a perceptual environment that welcomes the police state, at least a police state for those groups that are targeted in society, and that means black folks. The most fundamental fact that oppressed people need to know, I think it's the most useful information that oppressed people can possess, is that the corporate media is not and never has been your ally. They are an offensive weapon of the class that owns them. So whistleblowers and honest communications outlets like The Real News and like Black Agenda Report, we can shed light on a situation, but only an organized people can change that situation by confronting the enemy directly. And that enemy includes the corporations, the corporate media. They have to be part of any organized resistance to corporate rule. Thank you.